Here we go. Okay. Okay, so morning everyone. It's a little past 9 and it looks like we are live and ready to go. Sorry, I'm working on a few different windows here, so it's kind of like being in my Makerspace looking at all the tables at the same time. Okay, so let's start. Hang on a second. We need a little interlude music going on here while well, we iron out a few technical things. Okay. Okay, so let's go. Now, I need to apologize a little bit. I somehow have some kind of rough voice this morning. I don't know why, but I think all of our immune systems have been on pause for the last couple of years. So anybody teaching is bound to get some kind of sore throat or cold or sniffles or that sort of thing. So, but you know, I got my halls, I got my water. And interesting thing, when you I discovered this about a month ago. When you are having a Hall's candy and you have a mask on, especially when you have glasses to wear, and your first breath out, it's like it burns your eyes. And I realized that very quickly that's not a good idea. So little bit of tidbit on that. So my name is Chuck Stoffel, and I am technically I'm the science teacher in a K-8 elementary school in Windsor, Ontario, and so I teach science to approximately 400 kids at our school, and I see each of them once a week. Varies anywhere from uh, 40 minutes to. Am I good to go? I think so. Okay. So anywhere from 40 minutes to 60 minutes. Sometimes I see some kids once a week, sometimes twice a week. It's just we have an unusual schedule this year. And most of what I do is project-based, projects, challenges, and we do it in our Makerspace, which is called Hawks Makerspace. And the school name is MS Hetherington. So we design, we create, we build, and solve a lot of problems, and we have lots of fun in our space. And so the big thing I want to talk about, there's a couple things, and I know in discussing different situations and what's going on with colleagues, the biggest problem that we have, or the biggest issue, seems to be time and engagement. So time meaning our time seems to be really in big demand right now, and it's short supply, just because we have so many more. I know in our case, we have so many more IEPs now, individual education plans, and many more accommodations, more modifications. So our time is very valuable in terms of how we use it. And the other thing is engagement. And I know engagement has always been a big issue, but I think even more so now that a lot of the kids have been learning virtually, for some still are, at least for the last year and a half, off and on, and different times and different boards across Ontario. And so part of it is, and I talk to our teachers about this all the time. So why aren't we looking for different ways? And this goes back to Teachers College, to engage students more. And we all know that, but also to do a lot more integration of the curriculum, so we can actually save a lot of our time, and have some more fun and bring some fun back into learning again. That's part of the big thing right now. So what we talk about a lot in our school is what's holding us back from going forward and doing that, and putting a lot more STEM and projects and challenges into our in our daily plans, right? In what we do every day. And a lot of it has to do with mindset. And that's a big one, because as some of you may already know, and I may be preaching to the choir a little bit here, some of you may already know, but when you do something a little different from what you normally do, it is a mindset change, right? Especially with doing STEM activities. And we have student teachers in our building. Actually, I talked to them yesterday. I did a little lunch talk with them, and it goes right back to that, where we always resort to doing things period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4. So we kind of break the day down into big sections. And I always compare that to, so if you work on something at home, a project at home, or I do as well, we don't break the day down in terms of, oh, well, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to clean the garage. At 10 o'clock, I'm going to work on this project. At 11 o'clock, I'm going to do this. What we do is we work on something, and then we just carry on, right? A lot of times we don't stop until it's finished, right? So why don't we equate, or why don't we bring that into how we teach as well? And why not take the entire day to work on something, or half a day to work on something, or 2 days to work on a project? If it's fun, it's engaging, and you're getting something out of it, why not do that? And that's the part of the whole mindset shift, to do that sort of thing. And it's messy. doing STEM work, project work, challenges is really messy. But messes can be cleaned up. And I always say our custodian is a great example of this. When he comes in at the end of the day or halfway through the day, he'll look around and he'll say, "Wow, looks like the kids are having fun today," because it looks a little chaotic and there's kind of stuff everywhere. Sometimes the ground's a little dirty, but I always kind of say that creativity and innovation is not always clean, right? It's sometimes it can be a mess. And he gets it because he understands the whole idea of working on a project all day, or working on a project, for 2 days or a little bit longer. And it's very unpredictable because what happens quite often, I know in our situation, in our makerspace, students will take a project or a challenge in a different direction. And, a lot of times that is very tough to take. If you have a lesson plan and you're trying to teach something and students kind of vary off and go in a different direction. So you have to be able to adapt and come to a bit of compromise when that goes on, but also to have the end goal in mind as well, in terms of what you want to get out of it. Because what we always have to remember is everything is accessible. Even if they go in a different direction and you take pictures and videos, you can pull something else out of that too, right? And we're going to look at that. I've got a bunch of examples that we're going to look at and show you kind of, with things that we've done in our makerspace that is a good example of this. So basically, it's a willingness to change. And that's kind of what I find a lot as well. And ideas, the first thing my colleagues always ask is, how do I find these ideas? How do I get these ideas? And my student teachers yesterday, well, not mine, sorry, I don't have any right now, but the group that we have in our school, that's what they said. Well, where do you find these ideas? I said, well, you just have to look for them. And sometimes they just show up. So when you're driving around in the neighborhoods, on the news, in the community, certainly social media is full of great ideas, that sort of thing. And once you get the idea of, or once you get the routine of looking for these types of ideas, then they actually start coming fairly easily. And then you get, as many of you may know already, you get hundreds of files that you've saved that you'll probably never get to, because it's a great idea and you want to do it at some point in time, but there is not enough time. That's part of the problem. And it's hard. And I said this yesterday to the group that I was talking to. It is hard. It's hard to start. It's hard to maintain. You're always thinking, you're always going, you're always moving with it. But once you get used to it, once you practice it often enough, which is exactly what we tell our students, if you practice something often enough, then you start getting used to how to do it, and it becomes easier and easier all the time. Now, and this is also what I talked a little bit about with them and my colleagues too. And a lot of the reluctance to use STEM, every day, or use fun projects every day to pull assessment out of, is where do you start? And I always say the easiest way is to start with what familiar materials, familiar activities and supplies. So my go-to in our makerspace is always paper, because I find that paper is easy to cut, easy to fold, easy to manipulate. It's very familiar to the students and it's cheap, and I'll have to laugh sometimes too, because the students know me well enough, and many of them have been with us long enough that they know if we're working on something with paper, the first thing they ask, especially the primaries, they always ask, do we get to take it home? Because quite often, if we do a project with paper, they'll know that it's a prototype, and they'll know that we are going to use it to make something better, right? And then decide on what materials we want to use to make the project better, or tackle another goal with it, that sort of thing. So I always laugh when they ask if they get to take it home. For example, this week we just made a fun swing with 2 cylinders that rotated like a carnival ride. And that's the first thing they asked, is, are we going to take it home? And I said, yeah, you're going to take it home. So paper is the best, I find. And actually it does a lot with the students' motor skills and just the way they can manipulate the paper and the way they think about it, which is good. Keep it simple. Simple is great because you want to have lots of entry points in all the projects, the science projects that we work on, things in Makerspace. We start fairly simple because you want your 30 students or 25 or 20 students to be able to enter that activity on different levels and what makes them comfortable and gives them some success. Right? Not everybody's project is going to look the same, even though we want the same end goal in terms of them understanding what they're doing and being able to explain it and moving on to the next step. But they all may see it in a different way, and that's fine. But that's just for their ease of mind, so to speak, right? And until they can get better at doing different things. Now, this is huge, and this is all part of the time crunch. Connect. So connect just means we want to make sure we are able to connect more subjects together with one activity. And here again, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples in just a couple of minutes. So what we always do, or I always try to do, is we use science as our base in terms of looking at what we're going to work on in terms of activities and challenges and projects. And what we do from there is we take that and we say, okay, so how can we bring math in? How can we bring a third subject in? We try to always bring in 3 subjects in total, and one is science. And usually we try to bring in math with it as well. So those are kind of the 2 that go together. And it might involve some art, it might involve some science or some social studies. Definitely it'll involve some language at some point. So this is the time thing, right? This is the way to knock off a whole bunch of expectations in different subjects to maximize your time that you're spending with them, even though you think that you're wasting time by spending the entire day on something or 3 or 4 periods on something. You're getting you might actually get 10% of your math curriculum out of that project, right? Which is a huge time saver down the road. And make it fun. That's always what we try to focus on as well, because I know when I'm coming up with different things with myself, and if we're brainstorming with a colleague, that I always say my canary in the coal mine, so to speak, is if I don't feel like it's fun or interesting, then I don't want to do it, because if it's boring to me, I kind of feel like the kids, it's going to be boring. I'm not going to be engaged at all. So, and fun is a little more work, and it gets back to it's hard part. Making it fun means doing something extra, or an extra little step, or maybe an extra video, an extra supply. But in the long run, they'll be engaged longer and you'll get more out of it, and they'll be super excited to come back to school and continue on or do something new, because they always know that there's going to be something cool going on. Yeah, mind you, there is a little bit of boring parts that go on. We have to have mini lessons where we have to teach the kids some new skills, maybe, or some new techniques, or even some part of the curriculum that we know we're going to have to walk through with them. And at this point with our kids, they get that. They get that when we have to stop and we pause, but we only do it for a short time. We might only stop for 10 or 15 minutes to go over something. We rarely have a full period where it's hardcore, intense understanding. We try to break that down into little sections, and they seem to do very well with it, in terms of what they're learning. Retention, that's always a hard part, but we hope that by working with their hands and making the projects and doing the activities, that the retention will come along with it as well. And we actually, and I'm going to wander a little bit here. A couple of years ago, I'm going to give you a little story about retention. We have this thing called, well, I'm sure you do as well, Let's Talk Science, the challenges. And we do it at the university each year, except for the last couple of years. And the year before the pandemic, the grade 8s, there was one group of young ladies, and they've been doing Makerspace for years. And the one challenge was to they gave every team a box of items, and there was a challenge to do a certain thing with it, with the materials inside. And, within, they were given, I think, 2 hours or something like that. And within the half hour after they opened the box, they looked at the materials, they studied it, and they figured out what they wanted to do, and they did it. And they were finished, and they just rocked it. They just killed it, and no one could even touch them in terms of their ability to take the challenge and understand it and carry on with it, just because of their experience with doing that sort of thing in our makerspace. And that's part of the retention in terms of those skills. And they understood what they were doing, although they were a fairly great group of STEM girls, as I would call them. But that's the whole point of doing the repetition of the challenges and the projects that we do. And they actually did retain a lot of that, which was good to see. Mind you, on the question part, the question and answer on the trivia, they didn't do so well, but that I was very happy they did really well on the STEM project. But anyway, that's a bit of an aside. Sorry about that. And they also have to take ownership of it. So that's why I talk about keeping it simple, so they can enter at different levels at different points. Because if we just give them the challenge and we know what we want out of it, and they are starting in a different way, or a way they're comfortable, then all of a sudden they start taking ownership of it, because it's their design, their project, the way they're looking at it and the way they want to build it or create it or make it or solve the problem. It's not us telling them you have to do it this way, because all of a sudden now they're the ones that are going to own it and have the success. And I think they're going to remember it more for that as well. And that's what we're finding. I say we, in terms of our school, I have to admit, not all the staff is on board in terms of how we're trying to do this. A few of the teachers, we do make something in Makerspace or work with it, and they will take it back to the homeroom classroom, and they will carry on with it for the rest of the day, or even the next day with the project. And they love it, and the kids love it as well. So it's just a continuation of what they do in our in Hawks Makerspace, which I think it's a lot of fun, and the kids really like. They always ask me out in the playground if are they in Makerspace today, and that sort of thing. So it's fun. It's fun. They take ownership, which is good. So example time, and I want to spend a lot of time on going over this, because this is always the hardest part. And I showed a few of these to our student teachers yesterday, actually, and try to give them a sense of how to develop this, and how to look at it from a different type of a window. And actually, I showed them this, and we went through a bunch of examples with them. So this is a standard, simple project that I like to do in our makerspace, and I love to do this sort of thing in science. So just to explain what it is first, it's very simple. And on the surface, you would look at it and say, "Oh, that's busy work, right? That's just something to do to fill some time." Sure, it can be. But so what we do is they have to draw 9 lines, and 3 of them are 30 centimeters, 3 are 20 centimeters, and 3 are 10 centimeters. And not a lot of rules, just the 30 centimeter lines have to touch at least 2 of the edges, right? Because it's a big line, right? So just touch 2 of the edges, and the rest of the lines have to attach somewhere. And I just noticed there's a mistake on there where one of the pencil lines weren't darkened in and didn't go all the way across. Yes, we make lots of mistakes too. We get better at hiding it as we get older. And so on the surface of it, and this is one thing I emphasize a lot in our makerspace, and actually we've really went hardcore with it this year, is on the surface of it, I tell the kids, well, this is engineering drawing. And they say, well, what do you mean? I say, you're using a ruler, you're measuring, you're drawing straight lines, right? And that's the basis of it. Sure, we have computer programs that do a lot of the designing for us now, but you still have to understand how to measure, how to draw lines, and how to hold a ruler. And so, and that's how we started off. So, and then we tell them, say, okay, just color the spaces and try to make it so you don't have 2 colors beside each other. You can color in all different all different colors, each space if you want. And so this we did with the 7s and 8s, 3 classes, yeah, 3 classes. And so next, what I did is after we did this on cardstock. Okay, not regular paper, just on cardstock, something a little heavier. And so what I did after they finished is I told them, now what you need to do is cut the pieces out. And they cut them all out, and you can see the small pictures on the top right. So there's one student that's cutting the pieces out. And then what they had to do with this was they had to make a sculpture or a structure that could stand on its own using all the pieces. And this took a long time because it was huge in terms of developing a structure, for science, for what I wanted to get out of it. Because they had to understand how to, cut the slots in all the pieces and how to fit them properly so they would have a nice solid base to make this whole thing stand up. And yeah, there was a lot of frustration with this. And so all of a sudden, you can look at this and you can say, wow, wait a second. So on the surface of it, we have just some simple art, where they're drawing. They can do, shades and different art techniques, different colors, or however you want to do it. They could do designs and stripes and circles, whatnot. But also I have my science part of it, my engineering part of it. But you also have this huge math component that you can bring in, because they know dimensions of these lines, so they can do angle measurements. They can do equations to find lengths of lines. They can find out if some of these triangles and quadrilaterals follow the patterns of, what are the internal angles, what are the external angles. So you could spend a ton of time with this. One of the grade 7 teachers, that's what they did. They looked for, were there any parallel lines? Were there any angles that prove that they were parallel lines? So that class actually spent the entire day on this. We spent half the day designing this, cutting it, making the structure, and she did it again and made them measure the angles and that sort of thing. So, but then I also talked about how you can bring language into this, and it's a little different, but you could actually make a storyboard out of this, a story structure out of this. The kids could write a story on all the different pieces, where each piece could be a paragraph or a sentence or whatnot, and then you put it together in a way that you could try to read the story as you turn it, right? That's a little tougher to do. That's something we actually want to do that and have a little bit of fun with it. It could be for definitions in what you're working on, single words or sounds, or it can be pictures. They can draw pictures on each one and make a bit of a picture story in terms of language. So you can draw language, pull language into this one as well. And they could look at transformations, rotations, and flips, because they can cut the shapes out and do that. And also with the younger kids, they can make puzzles out of it. You can put different, like I said, you can put different words or endings or whatnot. So if you really think about it, you can use this for a lot, and not just kind of on the surface. Like I said, it looks like kind of a busy work thing to do to keep the kids busy, right? Draw lines and color the shapes. And one thing we're going to do with this that we never had a chance to work on before is with the grade 7s. If they take this and they can color some blue, some green, and some brown or darker color. And what they have is basically a map, somewhat of a topographical map, where they have the lower levels are blue, the water, the levels above that are green, the land, and then you have kind of a mountainous or taller hills in kind of maybe the brown color. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to cut all the shapes out and leave them laying as they are, and put cardboard underneath, so that when you look at it sideways, there are different elevations. You put maybe a few pieces of cardboard under the browns, one piece under the green, and nothing under the blue. So all of a sudden now you have this topographical map that has elevations to it, which is really neat. And we did a bit of a prototype with this, and it worked out pretty cool. And then you could take it even one step further and leave edges and round them and tape them so it actually looks like a real topographical map. And then you can actually write down elevations on edges and things like that. So we're actually going to do this, but we're going to do it on a bigger scale. We're going to do it on our robotics table, because the season will be over probably in April and May, and I think that's where we're going to try this out in a more of a giant type scale. And I think they're gonna have a lot of fun with this. Although they're gonna have to do the cutting and the measuring and everything still to get to the end point. But this is a great idea where something so simple and so easy to do, that requires minimal materials, can have such an impact in terms of what they learn in terms of curriculum. And my original end goal with this is just to give them some practice with lines, measuring, ruler work and structures. And everything else that came along, we just added to this whole assessment part. And it was more of the homeroom teachers that added, a lot of the math that went along with this, and they loved it. They thought it was great because it hit all the check boxes for them, and it did really, really well. So now so what I have next is I have some examples that we've done with projects that have taken more than just the time to create the one project all by itself. So these are all different ideas. And once again, my favorite material, paper, right? Actually, which is even better now because it's hard for us to use all the resources with all the classrooms in terms of sharing what we have. But so on the top left, these are my kindergartens. We did a winter scene. And for me, from the science perspective, I wanted them to do some structures, right? I wanted them to be able to roll some paper, make it three-dimensional, just so it looks like it's three-dimensional, and kind of give them that idea of how that works. But what the teachers were using it for as well, and we worked on this together, is they wanted to use some of the math, because they wanted to talk about the shapes of the paper and how the rectangles were turned into cylinders and how the cylinders were made of multiple circles, right? And the caps that they used for snowflakes, what shapes were they? And they actually got into doing a little bit of measurement work, believe it or not, in kindergarten, which was fun to see. They didn't really understand they were measuring centimeters, but they could read the numbers off the ruler and say, oh, this one's 4, this one's 5, this one's 6, right? Which was really neat to see. So a huge math component. And they also took their own bit of science work with this too, because they used their pictures, they took them out and they compared them to the trees in our playground, not the field anyway, to see, do they look the same? Do they look the same color? Do they have the same kind of shape? Does the snow look like that? And how tall are they? And how tall do you think they are? And are our trees, are they proportionally the same? So a lot of thinking going on in terms of this. So they actually used this for most of the day when we took it back to their classroom to get more assessment out of it. And then they made a little story out of it. What's going on here? It was an oral story that they did. So here again, what could be just a simple, okay, let's make a 3D scene. Let's roll some paper. Let's make it a winter scene. Done. Take it home. No, you can actually use it to do more. And here again, we talk about saving time, right? Because time is huge, in terms of what we said before with, all these extra expectations that are put on teachers now. So bottom left is grade 1s, where basic science, plants, they had to, make a drawing after talking about parts of the plant, then make a drawing and label it. And they did fairly well. And then what we decided to do is take that one step further and introduce a big math component to it as well. And they had to take a box, they had to measure the paper and cut it out properly, do a cylinder, make a 3D plant scene, with it as well, include all the elements. So there was also a bit of a social studies element brought into this too with the grade ones. And it was a lot of fun. And this was a full day project. We worked on this all day. And we knew ahead of time it might be coming because we always have boxes in Makerspace that we can use. But if we don't have boxes, we have lots of cardboard, and they have to make their own boxes. And they're actually, everybody's pretty good at that now in terms of cutting sides and whatnot, and taping them all together. But here again with the grade ones is a great um, idea of extending it to cover more curriculum, right? And art as well, right? Because they're combining shapes, they're combining different, like the 3D element. And what we didn't get into is textures. There just wasn't enough time to do that because we did want to only spend the day on it, not more than one day, because we did want them to be able to take this home at the end of the day, and they did. And the homeroom teacher was just ecstatic. Tons of expectations out of this, even more after she did the videos of the stories and their boxes, and she even actually pulled more out of it than she thought she would be able to. So on the top right is our, we always do marble runs. Almost every grade does a marble run of some type. It's just the expectations are very different as we move along. And I think this is grade 3. Yeah, these are the grade 3s. And so their expectation with these, and these girls aren't quite done yet, but they have to travel 3 different directions and have at least 2 corners. And they're kind of halfway through here. So from a science perspective, I love it because it involves structures for them. And this is huge because they're learning how to put flares and flanges on the bottom of cylinders to make them structurally sound, because this moves into other things that we do later on. With paper and structure support, whatnot. So we're big on structures. We're big on helping the kids understand how to make something that's solid, something that's not going to fall down, something that will hold a weight, right? So that's a big part of what we do. So they understand, because part of, I'm veering off a little bit here, but because part of it is we need them to know how to build something strong in order to move forward, right? We don't want to waste time on that in grade 7 or grade 6 or grade 5, because they should know that already, and that's working out actually very well. But anyway, going back to this, so from a science perspective, yes, it's the structures, it's a bit of coding in terms of the marble moving in different directions. Very simple, mind you, but also what we do too is for the math element is it's a lot of graphing, because what they do is they take the time it takes to go down, the time it takes to go down each straightaway, each piece that they make, and they graph all that. Then they compare others and they graph everybody's to see how long it takes for them to go down. And then what we also do too is we try to get 2 or 3 of them to connect their marble runs in some way, shape, or form, right? And it makes it even a bigger project then, because really what we do is we're giving them a chance to make a carnival, or like a giant kind of roller coaster. And then beyond that, what they have to do is they have to just say, okay, we're going to, so then make a ticket booth for this. And then how much are you going to charge for your ride? How much money will you make, and how much change do you get? So so it just keeps going and going and going. This is at least a 2.5 days worth of project that they did with this, and they still talk about that. The older kids say, can we do that again? They had so much fun with it, they want to do it in grade 7 and 8. But we do it with them, but they have much more complicated things that they have to work on. So it's not just a marble run, it's more, right? And you can bring art into it as well, because they can start doing some color in it, they can start doing some scenery, some landscape, and dress it up some more, right? And the only hard part about this is at the end of the day is who's going to take it home. Is it a rock, paper, scissors thing? Do you decide ahead of time who takes it home? That's the hardest part, but yeah, life's like that. And on the bottom right, now this is part of the reason why we work hard on paper structures, is because, so this is a ship to shore project, and it was huge for the grade fours. In I think it was in social studies, they were talking about, I can't remember what it was, but the whole idea of shipping came along. Very relevant current topic right now, but this is not this year, this was a couple years ago. And so I can't remember how it started, but they talked about how these cranes work on the docks. So we decided to make a project out of it. And so they had to develop their own crane to take, they had to make a container, and it had a load, and they had to make a crane that would lower the load onto a rolling chassis, which they had to make like a truck. And the truck took the container to the factory, where that crane that the person in the red is trying to manipulate would take the load off the truck for the factory. And this is what we really wanted them to do, because they had to pivot that crane just using paper. So one cylinder into another cylinder that turned, right? And it was a pivoting crane. They had to make a pulley system on it that would lift it up. And this was huge. It took a long time, but they were just so excited to work on it all the time. And there was so much in terms of lots of science on this, because we went way into the whole environmental idea of shipping and factories and transportation, and is it good, is it bad? And we brought social studies into it, and we brought a ton of math in this, because they had to make a map of their ship to the factory, and what route will they take, and how will they go, and we brought some coding into this, because it had to be all directional. So it was big, and they had lots of fun with this at the end, because we actually did this with Lego and gears. We recreated it using just Lego, and that took a long time. But they had just a solid understanding of the grade 4 science curriculum at that time, and they carried that forward with them. But this here again is a project that it incorporated so many subjects into it, and it made time so much easier, because you covered in terms of science, we covered it all. We covered the entire structure unit with that in 2.5 days. And math, the teachers were covering lots of math with this as well. And then we did the whole environmental part of it with some other subjects as well. So it was great. It really worked out well. And this was fun. This is our superstar kindergartens. So they were given a piece of paper, a square net, a cube net, and started simple, how to fold it, how to put it together. And I knew it wouldn't stop there. I knew they were going to want to do something else. And so this young lad said, "Hey, I think I could put something inside this box," because obviously, when he was putting it together, the one part he was having troubles closing it with tape, and he says, "Well, wait, this is like a box. I could put something in here." And then I said, "Well, if you want to do a box, then I think we have to make a box with lids." And they said, "Okay." And so we brought cardstock out, and as you can see in the middle picture, we didn't give them any new nets or anything. They just had what they had folded, and they had to cut the pieces out to make this themselves, and they were able to make a box with a lid that went on and off. And then, of course, the person in the middle, once he discovered how to do this, obviously you could tell he just made one. He said, "Well, I wonder if I could put anything on top." And then he tried to put a clay block on top, and of course it flattened it. And I said, "Well, now we have to figure out how to make these strong and what shapes we need to make." And it led to getting some straws out and learning about triangles and how it supports a load. So all of a sudden, what started as a simple paper project turned into this huge science and math activity that they just loved. And all of a sudden in kindergarten, they understood what the grade 3s have to learn in terms of my part of it in terms of science. And they took this back to their class, to kindergarten, and now that they knew how to make these boxes and these cubes, they made a cityscape in their kindergarten class. And then they did all kinds of things. They had Ozbots that they used that drove down the roads, and so it just went on and on and on. And that was interesting. That was the year where the our principal at the time, where he couldn't believe in the report card comments how often Makerspace was mentioned that year for the kindergarten assessments, because so much came out of it for math and social studies and community and coding and all kinds of things, right? It was a blast. But those were also that was a rock star class, those guys there, and they still are. And it was a lot of fun. Okay, so my last slide I have of examples, and I'll go through this quickly. So on the top left, this is an example of something that can just go in a completely different direction, where my grade threes were working on just heritage houses, that's all. Houses back in the 1800s, that sort of thing, part of a early settler unit that they were doing for social studies. And we just made, simple frames, and they had to put, what they thought would be inside. And of course, one thing led to another. And, they wanted blankets and they wanted stuff like that. And then we actually taught them how to do some sewing, needle and thread. And they didn't want to stop there, because they saw the grade sixes playing with these circuit boards, which are actually makey-makeys. And they were just enthralled with the idea that you could touch things and it would show up somewhere on a computer. And so what we did is, because we were going to have an open house where the parents would come and see their projects, because they did a really good job. And they wanted to do the same thing the grade sixes did. So they made a little touchscreen board and had pictures of the things that they put inside their house. And I showed them how to record their voice in Scratch. And we hooked up the makey-makeys to their projects, ran some tin foil on the back. And when parents came around, they could touch the pictures, and the kid's voice would be the one to explain what it was inside the house. And it was amazing. It just, and that took us, I think, about 4 days to work on. But it covered so much material. And this is one of those ones where this went in a completely different direction. And, we were okay with it. The homeroom teacher was okay with it. And there it was, so it was huge. It was language, it was math, it was social studies, it was science. It was big. It was really big. And on the right, the grade fours were working on small houses, and big math component. They had to design the interior areas. From my perspective, from science, they had to do the walls and make it reasonably sound. This was a bit of a prototype. The one that you see, this is a family room and kitchen and bathroom and bedroom sort of thing. And then they talked about in their own class how they wanted to do a second story on it. And then it came to the point where then you're going to put a roof on it, and the roof has to be structurally sound. So it led into, on the right, top right, where they designed some different trusses to see how much it would hold. And I loved it because it was kind of part of the bridge building component, right? So we killed off all kinds of expectations with this one. And on the bottom, this was fun. I don't know if that is going to show. It might. I wanted to get the fives to do more drawings, more engineering type drawings. So, and the picture in the middle is a rolling chassis. That's our standard chassis that we make in Makerspace. Everybody knows how to make one of those for different projects. But I wanted them to draw it this time and then build it. So they had to do the measurements, the drawing first, and use a ruler. And then build the chassis based on their drawing to make it exactly the same size. And then the grade five says, well, and I didn't say anything about making a move. This was my only expectation out of it. And we got some math out of it because of areas, a measurement and whatnot. We didn't really bring much else into that. But then the kids themselves, they said, hey, we want to make this move now, but we don't want to use balloons. We don't want to use sails because they've already done that before. We don't want to use elastics. We want to do something else. And I says, well, make it move by itself then. Well, they said, well, how can you do that? I said, I don't know. How can you do that? Because we're looking at forces as well. And then I said to them, well, do some research, look at some videos. And then they came up with the gravity cars. We have done this project before in Makerspace, but not with these guys. And so I said, well, then if you're going to do that, it's going to have to travel on its own speed, at its own force somehow, because it's a transfer of energy. That's really what I was getting at. And then they worked on using fishing line, and I'll run this one. I don't think you're going to hear the sound though. Using fishing line and weights, and they would wind it up and it would drive all by itself as the weight went down and touch the top of the car. So the teacher took this and went and said, okay, we're doing math with this, because they did the distance traveled and the time it took for the weight to go down and the diameter of the wheels and the diameter of the shaft that it was attached to, and did a whole component in terms of what if the string was, or what if the weight was bigger, what if the wheels were bigger, what if the shaft was bigger, or how far did it travel compared to the weight. And they compared all their projects together, and they did graphing, they did data on it, they did some analysis on it, and wow, it was great. It just blew my mind how far they took it. So here again is another project that just morphed into something else, and this was because of the kids, right? They took ownership of this. They're the ones that wanted to do it, so they took ownership, and they're the ones that did the research, and we just came up with the plan and the materials that they could use, for it to go farther. So, and that is it for me in terms of what I have to talk about, and I hope that gives you a better understanding of how to bring in more curriculum into STEM projects. We live and breathe it in our school, and it's becoming very successful. The kids love it, and I think they're doing well. They're learning a lot more, and I think the teachers are a little less stressed because they're understanding that they can get more assessment out of certain projects, so they can move on and do some other things as well. Now, I don't know if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, or any comments at all, or I think I have a few minutes still. So I don't see any coming up anywhere. Okay, so if you want to connect with me after this, Twitter is probably the best place. It's just my name, Chuck. Just search Chuck Stoffel, ChuckStoffle. I'm on Twitter all the time, sharing projects and that sort of thing, and talking about other projects that other people have done. That's usually where I post a lot of the things that we do in our Makerspace. It's a great network that we have on there. So if there's no questions, then
Hi,
Joseph.
hi.
Hello.
Yes, my name is Joseph Isha. I'm one of the STAIL volunteers, and I'm part of the STAIL board as well. And I just popped in. I want to thank you for your presentation. It was
welcome.
fantastic, super enjoyable, and definitely the name simple doesn't necessarily mean it's limited in that capacity for these hands-on STEM projects. So I want to thank you so much for that, and I want to thank everyone who had tuned in and joined us for this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph.
Excellent. And I hope everyone else enjoys the rest of the sessions today.
Yes.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.